In the final decades of the 19th century, Princess Beatrice, the youngest child of Queen Victoria, raised 4 children at the heart of the British royal household. They were grandchildren of the most powerful woman in the world, connected to European royalty, and shaped by the Victorian expectations of duty, discipline, and dynastic responsibility. Yet their lives moved in strikingly different directions. One became a marquess who abandoned royal titles to work in the business world. One became Queen of Spain and watched her dynasty fall. One quietly battled the genetic legacy of hemophilia, and one died on the front lines of World War I, the last of Queen Victoria's grandchildren to fall in battle. Today, we trace each of their lives, fully, chronologically, and without myth-making. These are the complete biographies of Princess Beatrice's children, what they inherited, how they lived, and what remained after they were gone. Alexander Albert was born on November 23, 1886, at Windsor Castle. He was the first child of Princess Beatrice and Prince Henry of Battenberg. His arrival marked the beginning of a new generation within Queen Victoria's household. The Queen had insisted that Beatrice remain with her after marriage, and Alexander's birth took place in the rooms his mother occupied at Windsor. The infant was styled His Serene Highness Prince Alexander of Battenberg at birth, reflecting his father's German mediatized title. Within months, Queen Victoria granted him and his future siblings the style of Highness rather than Serene Highness, elevating their status within the British royal hierarchy. This adjustment signaled the Queen's desire to keep her youngest daughter's children closely integrated into the royal family. Alexander was christened in the private chapel at Windsor. His godparents included the Queen herself and several European relatives. From his earliest days, he lived under the direct supervision of his grandmother. Alexander spent his formative years within the structure of Queen Victoria's household. His mother served as the Queen's unofficial secretary, managing correspondence and assisting with daily affairs. This meant Alexander and his siblings were raised in proximity to the monarch, often dining in her presence and accompanying her on moves between residences. The children followed a strict routine. Lessons began early each morning. Meals were taken at fixed hours. Recreation was supervised. Queen Victoria took personal interest in their development, offering opinions on their behavior and progress. She expected discipline, obedience, and proper conduct at all times. Alexander grew up alongside cousins from other branches of the family. His childhood was materially comfortable but emotionally restrained. Affection was expressed through duty rather than demonstrativeness. The household moved seasonally between Windsor, Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, and Balmoral in Scotland. Alexander's early education followed the standard pattern for royal princes. He was taught by private tutors within the household. His curriculum included languages, history, mathematics, and religious instruction. Physical exercise and outdoor activities were incorporated to build stamina and character. At age 13, he was sent to Wellington College in Berkshire. The school had been founded to educate the sons of military officers and was considered appropriate for a prince with likely military prospects. Alexander adapted to institutional life. He participated in sports, studied the required subjects, and prepared for a career in the armed services. Upon completing his time at Wellington, Alexander entered the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. He trained as a naval cadet, learning seamanship, navigation, and officer duties. The Royal Navy was the traditional career path for younger princes, and Alexander followed it without deviation. Alexander was commissioned as a midshipman in 1902. He served aboard several vessels, gaining practical experience at sea. His postings took him to the Mediterranean and other stations. He performed his duties competently but without particular distinction. By 1908, Alexander had reached the rank of lieutenant. However, he found naval life increasingly unsuited to his temperament. The extended periods at sea, the rigid hierarchy, and the limited opportunities for advancement all weighed on him. He requested and received permission to transfer to the Army. His naval service had been respectable but brief. It provided him with discipline and a sense of duty, but it did not define his career. The transition to the Army marked a shift toward roles that would keep him closer to home. Alexander joined the Grenadier Guards, one of the senior regiments of the British Army. He held the rank of captain and later major. When World War I began in 1914, he was mobilized along with the rest of the Army. Alexander did not serve in frontline combat. He was assigned to staff and administrative roles, managing logistics and personnel matters. His work took him to various military headquarters but kept him away from the trenches. This was partly due to his position within the royal family and partly due to his own skills in organization. He received several foreign decorations for his wartime service, including honors from allied nations. These reflected diplomatic courtesy as much as personal achievement. Alexander performed his duties reliably, but without the heroism or drama associated with battlefield command. The war years were marked by personal loss. His younger brother Maurice was killed in action in 1914. His father had died in 1896. The war reshaped the world Alexander had known, and it would soon reshape his identity as well. In 1917, amid rising anti-German sentiment in Britain, King George V made sweeping changes to the royal family's names and titles. The House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha became the House of Windsor. German titles were relinquished. British relatives with German names were expected to anglicize them. Prince Alexander of Battenberg became Alexander Mountbatten. Battenberg, a German place name, was translated into English as Mountbatten. His father's family name was effectively erased and replaced with a new construction. At the same time, Alexander was created Marquis of Carisbrooke, Earl of Berkshire, and Viscount Launceston. These were British peerages, not royal titles. Alexander ceased to be a prince and became a marquess. He retained the style of highness but now held a rank within the British nobility rather than a continental princely designation. The change was both symbolic and practical. It severed his formal connection to his father's German heritage. It also positioned him as a British peer rather than a foreign prince. Alexander accepted the change without public complaint. After the war, Alexander transitioned to civilian life. He held no significant public role and received no major royal duties. Instead, he entered the business world. He joined Lazard Brothers, a banking and financial services firm, where he worked in various capacities. Alexander was involved in estate management and tenant welfare. He took interest in agricultural improvement and rural development. He served on the boards of several companies, lending his name and social connections to commercial enterprises. His work was steady but unremarkable. He was not a financial innovator or a prominent business leader. He was a titled gentleman with royal connections who participated in the professional activities available to men of his class. He maintained a household at Kensington Palace but lived modestly compared to other royals. Alexander's public appearances were infrequent. He attended family events and ceremonial occasions but avoided the limelight. His life was one of quiet respectability rather than public prominence. In 1917, Alexander married Lady Irene Denison, daughter of the second Earl of Loughborough. The wedding took place at the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace. The marriage was based on mutual affection and social compatibility. The couple had one child, a daughter named Lady Iris Mountbatten, born in 1920. Iris would later marry, but her marriage produced no children. This meant the Marquisate of Carisbrooke, created for Alexander, would have no male heir to continue it. Alexander and Irene lived together for over 4 decades. They maintained a home at Kensington Palace and participated in the social life of the aristocracy. Alexander continued his business work into his later years, though with reduced energy. He died on February 23, 1960, at Kensington Palace, at the age of 73. He was buried at the Royal Burial Ground at Frogmore. His death marked the end of the Marquisate of Carisbrooke, which became extinct upon his passing. Lady Iris inherited her father's estate, but not his title. She lived until 1982, maintaining connections with the royal family, but leading a private life. The Mountbatten name continued through other branches, most notably through Alexander's cousin Louis Mountbatten, whose family gained prominence in the mid-20th century. Alexander's legacy was modest. He had navigated the transition from German prince to British peer. He had survived the upheavals of war and social change. He had lived a long, quiet life at the edges of royalty. His story was not one of great achievement, but of dignified adaptation to a world that had moved beyond the Victorian certainties of his childhood. Victoria Eugenie Julia Ina was born on October 24, 1887, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She was the second child and only daughter of Princess Beatrice and Prince Henry of Battenberg. Her birth took place during the royal family's annual autumn stay in the Scottish Highlands. She was named after her grandmother, Queen Victoria, and after Empress Eugenie of France, a close friend of the Queen. Within the family, she was known by the Spanish pronunciation of her fourth name, Ina. This nickname would follow her throughout her life and eventually become her primary identity. Ina was christened at Balmoral, with Queen Victoria serving as one of her godparents. From infancy, she was raised within the Queen's household, subject to the same routines and expectations as her elder brother Alexander. Ina's childhood was spent moving between Windsor Castle, Osborne House, and Balmoral. She lived under the direct oversight of Queen Victoria, who took particular interest in her only granddaughter from Beatrice's marriage. The Queen expected proper deportment, fluency in languages, and accomplishment in music and art. Ina received her education from governesses and tutors. She studied French, German, and later Spanish. She learned piano and developed skills in painting and needlework. Her upbringing emphasized duty, discretion, and the responsibilities of royal life. Queen Victoria died in 1901 when Ina was 13. The loss reshaped the household. Beatrice retained apartments at Kensington Palace, and Ina continued her education there. The transition from Victoria's reign to that of Edward VII brought new freedoms, but also new uncertainties about the family's position. Ina grew into a beautiful young woman. She was tall, fair-haired, and elegant. She participated in court functions and social events, though her family's position was somewhat ambiguous. She was a princess by courtesy, but held no official rank in the British line of succession. After Queen Victoria's death, Ina entered the world of European royal society. She attended weddings, state visits, and family gatherings across the continent. These events served as opportunities for young royals to meet and form connections that might lead to marriage. Ina was considered an eligible match. Her mother was Queen Victoria's daughter. Her family connections extended across Europe. She was well educated, attractive, and trained in the expectations of court life. However, she lacked significant wealth or a prominent position in the British hierarchy. In the early 1900s, European monarchies were still interconnected through marriage alliances. Ina's prospects depended on finding a match that would elevate her status while satisfying the political and dynastic considerations of the families involved. In 1905, King Alfonso XIII of Spain visited London for a state visit. He was 20 years old, recently declared of age to rule in his own right, and actively seeking a suitable bride. During his time in London, he was introduced to Ina at a social gathering. Alfonso was immediately attracted to her. He found her beautiful, charming, and possessing the dignity expected of a queen. Ina, for her part, was intrigued by the young king. He was energetic, direct, and offered the prospect of a throne. The attraction was mutual and rapid. Alfonso made his intentions clear to his mother, Queen Maria Cristina, and to Ina's family. Negotiations began almost immediately. The match offered advantages to both sides. Spain would gain a connection to the British royal family. Ina would become a queen. However, there were obstacles. Ina was Protestant, and Spain required a Catholic queen. More troubling was the question of hemophilia. The genetic disorder ran through Queen Victoria's descendants, and Ina was a potential carrier. If she had sons, they might inherit the condition. For the marriage to proceed, Ina had to convert to Catholicism. She underwent instruction in the Catholic faith and was received into the church in a private ceremony. The conversion was a matter of political necessity rather than personal conviction, but Ina accepted it as the price of her future role. The question of hemophilia was discussed but not fully understood. Medical knowledge of the condition was limited in 1906. The Spanish court was aware that some of Queen Victoria's descendants suffered from the disorder, but the pattern of inheritance through female carriers was not yet clear. The risk was acknowledged but deemed acceptable given the political value of the marriage. Beatrice supported the match. King Edward VII gave his approval. The Spanish government and royal household prepared for the wedding. Ina would leave England and become Queen of Spain, a nation she had never visited and whose language she was still learning. Ina and Alfonso were married on May 31, 1906, at the church of San Jerónimo el Real in Madrid. The ceremony was grand and public, attended by foreign dignitaries and witnessed by crowds throughout the city. Ina wore a wedding gown of silver and white, and the event was celebrated as a unification of British and Spanish royal houses. As the royal couple returned from the church in an open carriage, a bomb was thrown from a balcony along the route. The device was hidden in a bouquet of flowers and exploded near the carriage. The blast killed over 20 people and injured many more. Ina's wedding dress was splattered with blood, though she and Alfonso were physically unharmed. The attack was carried out by an anarchist named Mateo Moral. He escaped the immediate scene but was later found and killed himself. The incident cast a shadow over the wedding festivities and served as a brutal introduction to the political tensions of early 20th century Spain. Ina responded to the crisis with composure. She did not panic or collapse. She returned to the palace, changed her clothes, and proceeded with the scheduled wedding banquet. Her calm demeanor impressed observers and established her reputation for courage. As Queen of Spain, Ina took on the ceremonial and charitable duties expected of her position. She became patron of hospitals, orphanages, and welfare organizations. She supported the Spanish Red Cross and promoted public health initiatives. Her work was genuine, but also served to build her public image in a country where she remained an outsider. Ina faced challenges integrating into Spanish society. She was a foreigner with limited command of the language and no understanding of Spanish customs or politics. The Spanish court was formal and conservative. Ina was expected to conform to its expectations while also representing modernity and connection to the wider European world. Her reception by the Spanish public was mixed. She was admired for her beauty and grace, but viewed with suspicion as a Protestant convert and a representative of British interests. The Spanish press scrutinized her behavior. Political factions alternately praised and criticized her depending on the issue of the moment. Ina maintained a dignified public presence. She learned Spanish fluently. She adapted to the rhythms of Spanish court life. She performed her role with professionalism, though she never fully belonged. Ina and Alfonso had 7 children between 1907 and 1914. Their first child, Alfonso, Prince of Asturias, was born in 1907. He was the heir to the throne. It soon became clear that he suffered from hemophilia. The genetic disorder had passed through Ina, confirming the fears that had been raised before the wedding. 2 more sons followed, Jaime in 1908 and Beatrice in 1909. Then came another son, Gonzalo, in 1914, who also had hemophilia. The presence of the disorder in 2 of the couple's sons created tension within the marriage. Alfonso blamed Ina for bringing the condition into the Spanish royal family. The couple also had 3 other children, Maria Cristina in 1911, Juan in 1913, and another stillborn son. Juan, born without hemophilia, would eventually become the father of King Juan Carlos V and the grandfather of King Felipe VI, ensuring the continuation of the dynasty. The hemophilia crisis damaged Ina's relationship with her husband. Alfonso became distant and took mistresses. Ina focused her energy on caring for her afflicted sons and managing the household. The marriage remained intact in form but not in affection. By the late 1920s, Spain was in political turmoil. Economic hardship, military failures in Morocco, and dissatisfaction with the monarchy created conditions for Republican movements to gain strength. Alfonso's personal unpopularity and his association with the dictatorship of Primo de Rivera further eroded support for the crown. In April 1931, municipal elections resulted in overwhelming victories for Republican candidates in major cities. The results were interpreted as a rejection of the monarchy. Alfonso faced a choice between attempting to retain the throne by force or leaving peacefully. On April 14, 1931, Alfonso and Ina left Spain. They did not formally abdicate, but went into exile. The Second Spanish Republic was proclaimed. The royal family dispersed across Europe. Ina settled in Switzerland, establishing a residence in Lausanne. The fall of the monarchy was abrupt and final. Ina had been Queen of Spain for 25 years. She had raised 7 children, survived political crises, and maintained her public role through personal difficulties. Now she was a queen without a kingdom. Ina lived in exile for 38 years. She maintained connections with her children and grandchildren. She kept the dynastic jewels and royal possessions that had been saved from Spain, referring to them as joyas de pasar, jewels to pass on. These items would eventually be returned to the Spanish royal family. She remained a figure of interest in European royal circles. She attended family events and maintained correspondence with relatives across the continent. She never remarried and never returned permanently to Spain, though she made brief visits in her final years. In 1968, Ina returned to Spain for the baptism of her great-grandson Felipe, who would later become King Philippe VI. The visit was emotional and symbolic. She was received with respect by those who remembered her, though Spain had moved far beyond the world she had known. Ina died on April 15, 1969, in Lausanne at the age of 81. She was buried at the royal crypt of the monastery of San Lorenzo de El Escorial in Spain, alongside other Spanish monarchs. Her remains were transferred there in 1985 after democracy had been restored to Spain. Her legacy was complex. She had brought hemophilia into the Spanish royal line, a fact for which she was blamed during her lifetime. She had also ensured the continuation of the dynasty through her son Juan. Her great-grandson would restore the monarchy in a democratic Spain. Ina's life had been shaped by duty, endurance, and the unpredictable turns of history. Leopold Arthur Louis was born on May 21, 1889, at Windsor Castle. He was the third child of Princess Beatrice and Prince Henry of Battenberg. His birth followed the established pattern of his siblings' arrivals within Queen Victoria's household. Leopold was named after his uncle, Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, who had died in 1884. Prince Leopold had suffered from hemophilia, and his death at age 30 had been caused by complications from the disorder. The choice of name was both a memorial and, tragically, a foreshadowing. Within his first year, it became clear that Leopold had inherited hemophilia. The condition manifested through bruising, joint pain, and episodes of internal bleeding. His diagnosis confirmed that Beatrice was a carrier of the gene and placed severe limitations on his future. Leopold's childhood was defined by precaution. Physical activities were restricted. He could not participate in sports or rough play. He was kept under close medical supervision. Any injury, however minor, could lead to dangerous bleeding. His education took place at home under private tutors. He studied languages, history, and the arts. He developed interests in music and literature. His intellectual development proceeded normally, but his social development was constrained by his isolation. Leopold formed a close bond with his mother. Beatrice managed his care personally, overseeing his daily routine and medical needs. She had already lost her husband in 1896 and was determined to protect her afflicted son. The relationship was protective, but also limiting. As he grew older, Leopold lived quietly at Kensington Palace. He attended family events when his health permitted. He traveled occasionally within Britain, but rarely went abroad. His life was comfortable, but circumscribed. Despite his condition, Leopold received a commission in the British Army. The appointment was honorary rather than operational. He held the rank of captain and later major in the King's Royal Rifle Corps, but he did not serve in active duty. The commission acknowledged his royal status and provided him with a formal identity beyond his illness. It connected him to the military tradition of his family. However, it was understood by all that he would never see combat or engage in the physical demands of military life. Leopold wore his uniform on ceremonial occasions. He attended regimental functions when possible. The arrangement allowed him to maintain dignity and purpose while accommodating the realities of his health. When World War I began in 1914, Leopold was 25 years old. He could not serve at the front, but he sought ways to contribute to the war effort. He was assigned to administrative and staff roles far from the fighting. His duties involved paperwork, personnel matters, and coordination tasks. He worked within military offices in London. His service was genuine but limited by what his body could endure. He attended meetings, reviewed documents, and supported the functioning of the military bureaucracy. The war brought personal tragedy. His younger brother Maurice was killed at Ypres in October 1914. Leopold attended the memorial services and grieved the loss. The war continued for 4 more years, but Leopold remained in his safe posting, physically unable to join the men dying in the trenches. After the war ended in 1918, Leopold returned to his quiet life at Kensington Palace. He lived with his mother and sister Ina when she visited from exile. His daily routine was stable and predictable. He read, listened to music, received visitors, and attended family gatherings. He never married. The risk of passing hemophilia to children, combined with his limited mobility and uncertain lifespan, made marriage impractical. He lived as a bachelor, supported by his mother and the royal household. Leopold's health declined gradually through his 20s and into his 30s. Repeated bleeding episodes damaged his joints, his mobility decreased, he required increasing assistance with daily activities. The cumulative effects of the disorder wore down his body. In April 1922, Leopold underwent surgery on his hip. The operation was intended to address joint damage caused by repeated bleeding. However, surgery posed extreme risks for hemophiliacs. Even minor procedures could trigger uncontrollable bleeding. During or shortly after the operation, Leopold began to hemorrhage. Medical intervention could not stop the bleeding. He died on April 23, 1922, at Kensington Palace. He was 32 years old. Leopold was buried in the Royal Burial Ground at Frogmore in Windsor. His grave is marked with a simple stone. His death was noted in court circulars and newspapers, but did not receive extensive public attention. He had lived a private life and died a private death. Leopold's story fits into the broader narrative of hemophilia among Queen Victoria's descendants. The disorder affected multiple grandsons and was passed through several of her daughters. Leopold was one of several who lived restricted lives and died young because of the condition. He left no children and no lasting public achievements. His life was shaped entirely by his illness. What remains is the record of a man who endured suffering quietly, lived within severe constraints, and died when medical science could not save him. His legacy is one of loss rather than accomplishment. Maurice Victor Donald was born on October 3, 1891, at Balmoral Castle. He was the youngest child of Princess Beatrice and Prince Henry of Battenberg. His birth took place during the annual royal sojourn in Scotland, continuing the family pattern. Maurice was named after his paternal uncle, Prince Maurice of Battenberg, and given middle names reflecting his British and Scottish heritage. He was the last grandchild of Queen Victoria born during her lifetime. The Queen was 72 years old when Maurice arrived and had 10 more years to live. Unlike his brother Leopold, Maurice showed no signs of hemophilia. He was a healthy, active child. This freed him from the restrictions that had defined Leopold's life and allowed him to pursue a conventional upbringing. Maurice grew up in the same royal household as his siblings, but his experience was markedly different due to his good health. He participated in physical activities, played sports, and enjoyed outdoor recreation. He was energetic and sociable. He attended Wellington College, following the path his eldest brother Alexander had taken. At Wellington, Maurice excelled in athletics and military training. He was popular among his peers and demonstrated leadership qualities. The school prepared him for a career in the armed forces. After Wellington, Maurice entered the Royal Military College at Sandhurst. He trained as an Army officer, learning tactics, strategy, and the practical skills required for command. He graduated and received a commission in the King's Royal Rifle Corps, one of the British Army's line infantry regiments. Maurice joined his regiment in 1911 and began his career as a junior officer. He served in peacetime Britain, participating in training exercises and garrison duties. He advanced through the standard progression of ranks and responsibilities. The military life suited him. He enjoyed the discipline, camaraderie, and physical challenges. He was well regarded by his superiors and respected by the men under his command. His royal background was acknowledged but did not define his military identity. By 1914, Maurice was a capable young officer with several years of experience. He held the rank of lieutenant and was assigned to active duty with his regiment. When war broke out in August 1914, he was ready for deployment. Maurice's regiment was part of the British Expeditionary Force sent to France in the opening weeks of World War I. The BEF was Britain's initial contribution to the war on the Western Front. It consisted of professional soldiers, well-trained but vastly outnumbered by the German forces advancing through Belgium and France. Maurice arrived in France in August 1914. He participated in the retreat from Mons, the Battle of the Marne, and the subsequent fighting as the British and French armies attempted to halt the German advance. The conditions were chaotic and brutal. Casualties were high. By October, the fighting had shifted to Flanders and Belgium. The First Battle of Ypres began on October 19, 1914. The battle was a desperate attempt by both sides to break through enemy lines. The British held a salient around the Belgian town of Ypres, defending against repeated German attacks. Maurice's regiment was positioned near the village of Zonnebeke, northeast of Ypres. The fighting was intense. German artillery pounded British positions. Infantry attacks came in waves. The British lines held, but at enormous cost. On October 27, 1914, Maurice was killed by shellfire near Zonnebeke. He was 23 years old. The circumstances of his death were typical of the Western Front: sudden, violent, and anonymous amid the larger carnage of battle. Maurice was the first of Queen Victoria's grandchildren to die in World War I. He would not be the last, but his death came early in the war when the scale of the disaster was still becoming clear. His loss was mourned within the royal family and reported in British newspapers. Princess Beatrice received the news at Kensington Palace. She had already lost her husband in 1896 and would later lose Leopold in 1922. Maurice's death was the second devastating blow in a series of losses that would define her later life. Maurice was buried in the Ypres Town Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery. His grave is marked with a standard military headstone listing his name, rank, regiment, and date of death. He rests among thousands of other soldiers who fell in the Ypres salient. The British public responded to his death as both a personal tragedy for the royal family and a symbol of shared sacrifice. The fact that a prince had died alongside common soldiers was noted and used in propaganda to emphasize national unity. Maurice became an emblem of royal participation in the war effort. Maurice's legacy is tied to his status as one of Queen Victoria's grandchildren. He was the youngest of her grandsons and the last born. He was also the only one to die in combat during World War I. Other grandsons served in the war, but Maurice was the sole combat fatality. His life was short. He had no opportunity to marry, have children, or leave a lasting personal mark. What remains is the fact of his service and death. He represents the generation of young men, royal and common alike, who were destroyed by the First World War. His grave at Ypres is his monument, and his name is one among many who fell in the defense of a world that would not survive the war intact. These were the children of Princess Beatrice, a marquis who adapted to a changing world, a queen who lost her throne, a prince who lived in the shadow of illness, and a soldier who died in the first months of a catastrophic war. Their lives were shaped by their grandmother's legacy, their mother's devotion, and the forces of history that swept away the certainties of the Victorian age. What they inherited was privilege and duty. What they left behind was a record of endurance, adaptation, and loss.